This is Picks on Politics Daily with Dan Mannarino.
All right, everybody, welcome to Picks on Politics Daily. I'm Dan Mannarino. Here we are, June 23rd. Early voting has ended for the primaries in New York City. So tomorrow, the 24th, is, of course, the all-important election day. And it's going to be downright hot. We're talking temperatures in the high 90s, feel like temperatures in the hundreds, right? So Governor Kathy Hochul now issuing this executive order that can change polling places on being allowed to give out things like bottled water to people who are in line, because it's all about voter turnout. A lot of folks like to vote on election day. They don't necessarily want to do it in early voting, right? So it's going to be key to having some things that can keep people cool. We had the Office of Emergency Management on this morning talking about how they're going to be air conditioning some of these polling locations. Some of them don't have air conditioning, so they're bringing in these industrial fans. They're worried about the power grid, right? Because you're going to have more power being used now with people using air conditioning, plus all the voting machines that are going to be in different places as well. So they have generators in key parts of the city where they see an uptick in demand because of it. So the weather, a huge factor. All of that, right, happening after big news this morning that dropped at 6 a.m. Emerson College, along with us here at Pix 11 in the Hill, dropping a poll, the final poll before Election Day. And it's a big one. It's a doozy because it really shows a flip-flop. It has Zohran Mamdani for the first time that we're seeing in the final round of ranked choice voting taking the lead over Andrew Cuomo. So let's talk about this. Let's bring in Spencer Kimball. He's the executive director for Emerson College Polling here. And Spencer, good to see you, my friend.
Good morning, Dan. Good to have you.
So let's talk about this, okay? Because you have the Cuomo campaign immediately this morning saying, well, this is an outlier, not a credible poll, right? Which is what you expect to hear from a campaign when they don't like what the numbers say. But this is the first time we're seeing it. So can you talk about how and why you went about this at this time and right before primary day?
Well, Dan, we've had a chance to study this race for the last 6 months, starting in February. Over the course of the last 5 months, we've seen one candidate, Mamdani, move from 1% to 10% to 22%. Cuomo is still in that mid-30s. And that tells me that people knew who Andrew Cuomo was going into this race. And then if they liked him, they were voting for him. And if they didn't, they haven't changed their minds. That's his block of votes. Mamdani, though, he has seen a surge of support. And the question is, can he overtake Cuomo at the end here on Election Day?
Well, yeah, and especially because in the first time you guys did a poll, right, Mamdani was at what, 1%?
Barely 1%. It rounds up to 1%. So people didn't know who he was. He comes out of left field, and the next thing you know, he's captured the imagination of the voters and the enthusiasm of the voters. And we see this in the early vote. You can look at our poll numbers where he's up by 10 points in the early vote, 40-30. But what's also interesting is where that vote's coming out of Manhattan and Queens. It's not coming out of the Bronx. That tells me that he's got a lot of enthusiasm on the ground as well.
Well, and a lot of folks were saying, we talked to a couple strategists who were saying that folks going towards Mamdani, they believe were early voters, younger, that were doing early voting, right? We're seeing bigger numbers in early voting this go around than we did 4 years ago during the Eric Adams race, which is showing that there's a high interest in this one. But Andrew Cuomo's key is getting people to go out on Election Day. Now there's this heat factor as well. But when you look at this overall, I guess when you break it down, can you talk a little bit about how you went about the poll? I know it gets a little nerdy, but it's important to know how you kind of go about this.
Exactly. We need to speak to voters. And I want to thank everybody who participated in the surveys, not just this one, but in all of the polls that led up to here, because we take your opinions and we reflect that in these surveys. So what we've seen in public opinion is movement towards Mamdani. How much movement has there been? We think it's been quite significant, from 1% to 32%. We'll see what happens in the polls. But what we do is, how do we find these people is, I think, your question. We'll text message. We send out about 25,000 text messages to the city. A lot of you answer those texts or you post them online, say, hey, I got the Emerson poll. We also call landlines because there's older voters who don't do texting, and that this is a very important group because they vote at a higher propensity. So we make sure to get landlines included. And then we have an online panel of people that have participated in our polls in the past that we can kind of track to see how they're moving internally within our data set. So between those three modes for this study is what we used, and we used it consistently across the polling for the race.
Yeah, and what was very interesting too, thank you for laying that out, is the demographic of folks too, right? And we're seeing kind of Andrew Cuomo has gone after the Black and Latino vote. So how did that break down in this poll?
Well, the city is a minority majority city. It's only about 30% white. But in the vote, the white vote is going to vote at a higher propensity, and the black vote, which is about 20%, will also vote at a higher propensity. The Hispanic vote will vote a little bit lower. But you're correct. Cuomo is winning that Hispanic and black vote, the minority vote, about 60-40. His problem is the white vote is breaking for Mamdani by about 10 points. In the Asian vote, which doesn't get talked a lot about, but in New York City, could make up 11 to 13% of the vote. That's breaking heavy for Mamdani, almost 4 out of 5. So when you start to look within those race and ethnic numbers, you can start to see some division in the city amongst those groups.
Yeah, I mean, you by the way, you have all these on the top of your head. You're like a wealth of knowledge, Spencer. But here's the thing. When you look at it, and I don't want to forget about the other candidates for a moment, but again, strategists that we've spoken to said that the undecided, which in the last poll, I believe it was Marist, it was 11%, whatever, they believed that those undecideds were breaking for Mamdani, which is kind of showing now that has gone down to 4%, what you're seeing in the poll. But what about the other candidates, right? Are they seeing any kind of momentum? I mean, it's really a two-person race here, but Brad Lander had a big moment last week. He was arrested, and he was hoping for a bit of a bump.
And we think Lander did get a bit of a bump. But remember, he's driving in that same lane as Mamdani, and who are you going to take those votes from? So he does get a bump. I think he goes from like 7 to 13. Now, you got to remember, this is ranked choice voting. So you're kind of like on a team. And if you can get that team, if Mamdani and Lander can get up to 50%, you expect a lot of that Lander vote to come over to Mamdani. On the flip side, for Cuomo, he's got Adrienne Adams. She's taking about 8% of the vote, but no movement. She was at 8% last time and still at 8%. So she's holding on to her block of support, which is actually pulling away from Cuomo, because she's winning older black voters, females. And that's a big base of the Cuomo vote. And what we're seeing with her second choice, she wasn't very clear of who her second choice was. She didn't announce it. And so we're seeing a much more split of her vote as opposed to Lander, who's taking 13% of the vote. And that vote is breaking nearly 2-1 towards Mamdani. And if that number holds and it's a close race, Cuomo will need like a 6-7 point lead out of the initial round to be able to hold off the ranked choice voting.
I spoke to all the candidates about 3 weeks ago, and it was after Zohran had given Adrienne a bit of a boost by saying I would cross-endorse her, but she did not reciprocate that. And I said to her, are you interested in cross-endorsing? And she's like, I have to look into it. And then she came out last week and said, look, I'd like you all to rank the Working Families Party, but she didn't say what number you'd like to give them and where they fall, right? But what's interesting is, again, strategists that we've spoken to look at ranked choice voting from around the country, Spencer, and they said if somebody wins round one, which is what's happening in this poll, Cuomo is winning round one, that they go on to win in the final round. But this is not showing that. So what's happening in round 7 that you're seeing into round 8? Lander supporters are going to Mamdani?
Yeah, that final vote. So the Adams vote basically splits. It gives Cuomo a little bit of an edge, but you're talking tenths of a point. When the Landers vote, that 13 points gets split, that's like 8-5, 9-4. And so when that changes over, that puts Mamdani ahead by a very close margin. We're talking about a very exciting race that we have tomorrow night to watch. All the numbers are within the margin of error. So I'm not here to tell you Mamdani's going to win or Cuomo's going to win.
No,
I'm saying it's an exciting race that we did not have 6 months ago.
Yeah, it's certainly. But this is kind of what people said, right? They said, look at the Andrew Yang factor from the last election where he had the name recognition and the numbers all in the beginning, and then it kind of got chipped away along the way. What's very interesting about tomorrow night, Spencer, which I'm sure you know, is that we're not going to have necessarily a winner. We'll have the first round of, but the Board of Elections has already said that they're not going to run this ranked choice simulation until after tomorrow. So we should get the results sometime Monday or Tuesday. When you look at it, my question to you is: do you guys issue responses? And I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but like the Cuomo camp saying it's not credible and it's an outlier.
Yeah, I mean, we've dealt with this. I don't have to go too far back. We're in New York, so I feel like Yogi Berra, deja vu all over again. Don't forget about our Iowa poll when we were the outlier that had Trump up by 10, and people said that Harris was going to win that race. That's what we hear a lot about. But generally, after the election, nobody comes back and checks the work. If you look at our work back in 21, we had Adams winning by about 2 to 3 points. He ends up winning by a point. What we saw in that race, which is concerning to Cuomo, is that Adams had a 10-point lead after the first round. That dwindles down to 1 point. What happens if Cuomo has a 6-point lead? Does that dwindle down to Mamdani by 2 or 3 points? That's what's going to be exciting about when we actually get to the ranked choice counting. But to your point, that takes time because you have to wait for all the ballots to come in before we can start ranking out people. And I think they have to wait a little bit longer than a day or two to start doing that process.
Well, and also the Board of Elections, frankly, had a bit of a blunder in their last election cycle for the mayoral race was their first ranked choice simulation. And they had this whole error where they left test ballots in the machines and it kind of messed up. So they had to start all over again. So they're trying to avoid a mishap, I think, this go around from what we were talking to them about. But it's all very fascinating. And you're right. It is going to be a very exciting, not only tomorrow night, but waiting for those results as well. Spencer, it's been a pleasure talking to you along this cycle. You guys do amazing work. So it's been a pleasure being your partner in this.
Well, thank you. And we'll see how all things land tomorrow night after the election.
Oh, yes. All right. Spencer Kimball, good to talk to you, my friend. All right, everybody, and you too. And that brings us to tomorrow night, right? So, of course, the polls open 6 a.m. They go open till 9 p.m. And the city now saying get out and vote either before 11 a.m. when the real heat kicks in or after in the evening hours when it's a little bit cooler. So you're not waiting in this heat if there's a line at your election site as well. And that's that. And then also tomorrow night, we'll have special coverage here on Pix Plus. Joe, what time are we doing that? 9 p.m., right? 9 p.m. here on Pix Plus. For a special Picks on Politics to talk about it once the polls close. And then at 10:30 p.m. on Pix 11, we'll be having a special Picks on Politics as well. We have some analysts or reporters across the field as well at various headquarters as well. So it's going to be a big night here in New York City. We're with you every step of the way. And our Henry Rossoff is going to be on the campaign trail today talking to Andrew Cuomo, Zohran Mamdani, as well as others on the final day of campaigning before this. And he'll have a full report tonight on the evening news at 4, 5, and 6 p.m. But in the meantime, that'll do it for today. I'm Dan Mannarino. Thanks for watching. Stay cool.